The meeting is now open for the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Luann from New York, go ahead.
Thank you. I am so grateful to God for the beautifully written allegory on our website called On the Way There by Catherine M. Yates. It was so perfectly read by Carol that I began to mentally paint myself into the scene, recalling how I had once longed to exchange the nightmares of childhood abuse for a land filled with peaceful joy. As I listened, I traveled along with young Marjorie from bed to bog, from the islands of misconception to the white road and golden spires high above the hedges. I could see the loving woman as she compassionately shared her discovery. Unmoved by the bog and what it seemingly presented, she held to the truth. As Carol read, her individual voices brought the characters to life. I started to understand how it was that the errors began attaching themselves to me. I recalled all the times when, as a child, I wished I belonged to another family, convinced that God had made a mistake. I was jealous of my friends for what I believed they had. I saw how easily that turned into hate and revenge and falsehood, and eventually pulled me into the pool of ill health. I often ran high fevers as a child and struggled with an irregular heartbeat. As a young adult, I began to entertain thoughts of suicide and eventually gave up on any idea of a loving, merciful God. I spent my whole life trudging through that bog and was just about to be pulled under by the weight of it all before I was led into Christian Science. The story reminded me how my practitioner had guided me through the process of holding those errors up to the light until I could see right through them. And with one final breath, the smoke of them disappeared, along with any illness and suicidal thoughts. I am so grateful for this powerful message and what it has to offer anyone who struggles to find salvation. Seeing the error of materiality in this way has helped me to understand more clearly the work I must do each day to be watchful of my thoughts, of the thoughts I entertain, consistently holding them in the light of truth. This story has given me a greater appreciation for Mary Baker Eddy and all she has done for mankind. I am grateful for the tireless dedication of my practitioner and the members of this church who have helped in so many ways to lead me out of the darkness and find my freedom in working for God. Our God is truly a loving and merciful God. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Linda.
Thank you very much for those readings tonight and the music. I am very grateful for all that I am learning and for practitioner support here in this church. Before Plainfield, I had come across a slogan that said, "First things first," and it helped me start to think about where I would put my time and attention. It was a step in bringing a sense of balance to my life, but real change came when I came here and started to participate and practice the things that are taught from the Bible and Mrs. Eddy's writings. And with practitioner support and her prayers, I am beginning to understand how to put God first, the most important thing we must do, which is obedience to the first commandment. This discipline is replacing habits of rushing around, willfulness, and being caught up in the details of the day. Instead, the practitioner is helping me cultivate a sense of gratitude, trust, listening to God. And through this, the change in my life the last couple of years, I have seen patience and kindness, peace and joy come to my life in order and calm, which has also brought healing in my life physically through don't get the colds I used to, the severe sore throats, severe stomach issues have been fading all the way as I have been turning my life over to putting God first. And I'm very grateful. Thank you very much for the service tonight.
Thank you. Barbara or Ken from Pennsylvania?
Hi. Recently I awoke thinking of a salesperson who expressed many beautiful qualities, and it occurred to me that that's what God is doing. He's expressing divine love in unique ways in each one of us, and that's why he needs all of us. We all express him in usefully and delightfully different ways. This week I've been thinking a bit about what it really means to be God's reflection. Today I had a fresh insight while my husband and I were reading from the Bible, 1 Samuel. It happened to be the chapter about David and Abigail. I saw that these and other exemplary Bible characters give us a window into what it means to be God's expression, what we must strive for. I suppose that must be one of the primary purposes of the Bible, and these are not new ideas, but I'm grateful for the fresh views and greater clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary.
Quite a while ago, maybe a couple years, I began to develop pain in one of my hips. And at times it was very painful even to just walk. And I would, each time this would happen, I would pray for myself. I would pray, God did not send this. I do not need to have it. And I would resist it. It says in the Bible, resist error, resist evil, and it will flee from you. Resist the devil, and it will flee from you. And as I prayed, the pain would go away. But it would come back, and this went on for quite a while, a few months. And then one day, I got the news that the wife of a dear friend of mine was going to have hip surgery, a hip replacement, because of the extreme pain she was having in her hip. And this shocked me. Just the news shocked me, because it made me realize that I had been handling this whole situation totally incorrectly. I had been selfishly praying for myself. I needed to include all mankind in my prayers. That this attack, this belief of a hurtful hip was a wicked lie for all mankind, not just for me, but for everyone. So that kind of shook me up and woke me up. And after that, the next time my hip gave me a problem, I included all mankind in my prayers. And I saw this as a wicked lie for everybody. God did not make this for any of his children, and therefore all of his children deserved to be free from this false lie. As I prayed that way, the pain occurred less frequently, and when it did, it was less painful. And I'm grateful to say that it has been quite some time since I have had any pain at all in that hip. It has been healed through Christian Science prayer. I'm so grateful for what I am learning in this church. I'm so grateful for Mary Baker Eddy for giving us the science of Christianity, the explanation of the so-called miracles that Jesus did, that he promised to us that we would do if we would believe on him. I'm so grateful to be learning that you can't use this science selfishly. that it is to be used for all mankind. Mrs. Eddy says one of the things that results in healing is an unselfed love. So I'm grateful to be learning that when I have unselfed love in my heart, good things happen. And when I don't, they don't happen. So I'm grateful for everything that I'm learning here. And I'm grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Elizabeth from Georgia, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the very powerful readings tonight. I'd like to express my gratitude for this church, this country, and the sacrifices our forefathers made in the name of independence and freedom that allow all who live here to be free and to worship without fear. I was reading an article that was posted on the plainfieldcs.com website a few days ago. It was titled Glorifying God, and it was published in the Christian Science Sentinel in 1910, and it made a great impression on me. It starts out saying, "The student of Christian Science, if he is honest, has before him one definite task. His single aim must be to glorify God." And further, it also goes on to say, "The question, does this glorify God, tests everything we think and everything we set about doing, every plan, every temptation, everything to be accepted or rejected in our work, our play, our companionships, our surroundings, our daily going and coming. Everything, in short, to be done or not to be done can be tried by this one swift stroke that cleaves its way cleanly to the root of all action." And today this made me think about the history of this country and how glorifying God was so important to those who came before us. And it's just a good reminder to me to do the same and to get into the practice of asking myself, am I glorifying God? Thank you for the service tonight.
Thank you. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Good evening. Psalms 33:12. This verse begins as, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." How fitting a verse for today, Independence Day. This has been a glorious day, a mild 97 degrees and a possible humidity of 15%. After my usual Bible study lesson, I ventured out to the garage, opened the garage door, and settled down in the doorway to study our blessed Constitution. What a delightful way to spend the 4th. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy.
I am very grateful for this church and all the ways that Christian Science has made my life one worth living. When I first came to Plainfield, members here started talking about the need for rebuking, and I was very concerned as I have had a tendency before to be very harsh and unloving when calling people out for unwanted behavior. Because of this, I wanted to be sure that I stayed perhaps a little too nice, so I didn't get to that mean-spiritedness that I was once known for. Throughout the time that my practitioner has been working with me, she made it clear that being able to rebuke lovingly is an important part of living this science. Just a few months ago, she told me, "Rebuking is your friend," and I've been thinking on that a lot. So quite recently, a situation came up that really needed a rebuke, and I finally felt I was ready. I stated the case to the person in question in a loving manner, saying where things went off track and what needed to happen for us to move forward. It was taken well, and we moved on without any awkwardness or ill will. A fellow church member later told me she thought it went well, and I was grateful that she said that. I always do better when I can see good examples of what to do, and also have the opportunity to learn by doing. This church provides both. I'm very grateful for the steadfast practitioner support that has enabled me to quit relying on anything ungodly so that I may be useful and productive for God in this church. It is a great blessing to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Fairley from Maryland, go ahead.
Thank you. I am so grateful today for the freedom that we enjoy, and it was given to us by our forefathers who fought for this freedom and the blessedness of this country, and especially grateful to God, as was said in the watch last night, from Mary Baker Eddy and Christian Science. What other country, where could this have come from? Of course, it was in America. It's given us the ultimate freedom from the tyranny of the human mind. When I think of the depression I suffered as someone who had given up on a teacher, my practitioner, and the church I knew after I found Christian Science, it's thanks to the internet that I was able to find the Plainfield Church. And so I'm just expressing my gratitude for Christian Science, for Mrs. Eddy, for America, and for the Plainfield Church, and all that you've given to us all. And thank you very much for those very good readings tonight.
Thank you. Sharon.
I would like to express gratitude for a healing my mother had about 20 years ago. She was sitting in in a Wednesday evening church service and passed on. A practitioner sensed the need and came and sat in the pew behind her and started expressing love to her. One of the things I heard the practitioner tell her was how much God loved her, and she was a perfect child of God, and she was wrapped in God's love. There were many other truths, and I couldn't hear them all. But then she said to her, you have God's work to do in this church, and you are needed here. And she came back to life. Her color changed, and she was able to get up, sing the hymns, walk out of the service as if nothing had happened, proving it was just an illusion. Man does not die. And she lived on until recently, passed at the age of 96 after she had completed her work serving God. She was healthy. She was not at all ill. It proved Christian Science is the way. I am so grateful to God, to this church, Mary Baker Eddy, for the office of practitioner, and to be a member here. And thank you for the readings.
Thank you. Dede from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tonight's readings. I'm thankful to have learned in this church that my true freedom comes from my understanding of God, knowing that He is the only real presence and the one and only power. Before joining the Plainfield Church, I had a strong belief in God and an improved understanding from my childhood years, though I didn't really know Him. From what I've learned from my study in this church, I'm now aware that by understanding that God is my Father, Mother, who protects, directs, guides, guards, and governs all that concerns me, then there is no human condition, circumstance, demand, expectation, or opinion that can limit me, burden me, bind me, or keep me from knowing what God wants me to know, going where He wants me to go, or doing what He requires of me. I'm grateful for the constant reminders to defend myself from aggressive suggestions of any power apart from God. And I'm thankful for learning the truth that gives me the freedom and courage to do so.
Thank you so much again for tonight's meeting, for all the testimonies, and again for the readings. I'm grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Chardell.
Thank you for those awesome readings and the beautiful, beautiful music. I wanted to give a gratitude about testimonies. And then as I was thinking about that, I realized that we wouldn't have any testimonies if we didn't have the mental and prayerful work that goes into every single activity in this church. And then I began to think of how I would like to explain that the testimonies, not just given recently, have helped me. And it is a form of freedom because I've changed. I would not have done this a year ago even. And the testimonies were about standing up. One person talked about the courage to confront something, and he did it. And another was the courage to stand up that something was done on television and in a loud voice and really helped her grandchildren. That meant a lot to me, and I was thinking about it. And lo and behold, the other day, my 21-year-old grandson was in the family room, which is connected to the kitchen. And I needed to go into the kitchen and be there. And he was watching a program that was glorifying prostitution. And I said something, and I said, because I remembered what other people had done and given their testimonies about. And he challenged me. And then I called out loudly, "This is immoral." And surprisingly enough, he turned off the TV. And he left the room. But when he came back later to go out, he gave me a very loving goodbye and turned and looked at me. So I knew it was the right thing. Of course it was the right thing to do. Standing up under God's truth is a beautiful thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleen from Massachusetts, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for the readings tonight. They were absolutely wonderful. Thank you for this testimony meeting. And every testimony meeting, I learned so much from everyone's testimony. And last week, Fairley gave a beautiful testimony of how she understands that she's spiritual. And when she said it, I could tell she just understood, and she was confident and calm and peaceful about it. And so I've been thinking about this all week, and I thought, I study this all the time, that I'm spiritual, that we're spiritual. But do I really believe it? There's a difference, And Mrs. Eddy, she said, spiritual existence. This is the truth of our being. So I thought, well, if this is the truth, then even though I seem to be mortal, or I have these mortal thoughts or material sense thoughts, I'm really whole and spiritual now. And before I knew of anything of the Adam dream, I was pure and spiritual. And now I'm the same. I'm not changed. And through the love of God and right ideas, I'm able to overcome these mortal thoughts and these material senses and evil beliefs that I have to overcome. And I'm seeing a better picture of who I am. So I'm very grateful for all the testimonies. They're wonderful. And thank you, Fairley, last week. It was such a help to me. And I'm growing with this church a little every day, and it's just great. So thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Carol.
The other night on my way home from work, it was dark, of course, and there were cars parked on all along the road, and an angel thought from God. It had to have been from God. It came and it said to watch out for somebody opening the door. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd, but okay, I'll watch. And lo and behold, just a little bit further down the road, a guy swung his door open on his car and right in front of me. But I was ready because I had the warning, and there was no problem. I was able to go around it and not harm anything. But I thought about that, how often we get little thoughts from God and we just kind of blow them off that, well, that's ridiculous. Why would I listen to that? But that they really are angel thoughts from God. And just the way that I was protected and he was protected. It wasn't just me, it was both of us. And how much God loves every one of us. And that thought came and I was able to avert it. And I'm so very grateful for all the wonderful thoughts that come to us from God and how he's always watching over us. These small things really are not small, they're very big. And I am so grateful to God and so grateful to have found this church and a better sense of God that I'm learning here. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for the beautiful music tonight, the testimonies, and Amanda for the wonderful selections and the beautiful readings on our rights, our divine rights as children of God. That is what I was looking for, my divine rights and freedom from fear for so many years. I am so grateful to learn from Mrs. Eddy's teachings and the many articles from earlier workers that fear, although it appears to be underneath all our claims, is still an illusion. It is an error. I used to always react somehow to that feeling with a desire to resist it as if it was something, not knowing that engaging in the excessive effort of resisting it was giving it all the life it could ever have. Mr. Edward Kimball, an early worker, in his chapter concerning the practice of Christian Science, found on page 449 of his book, Lectures and Articles on Christian Science, says, Arrow would probably say, quote, "The only treatment that I am afraid of is the one that makes nothing of me, not enough to hammer. I am afraid of the destructive calm of the one who knows that I am nothing," unquote. This way of teaching us the importance of keeping our calm, no matter what, to see the nothingness of every error and the allness of God is so invaluable, and I cannot be grateful enough to Mrs. Eddy for exposing that bullying nothing and for leading us all through her teachings and the Bible's inspired writings into what is our true freedom. Fear is an error, and it is our right to be free. So grateful for tonight's service. I'm happy to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary.
I have a couple of notes to read tonight. The first, Illinois. Dear Plainfield, I am so grateful to Plainfield for the stability and spiritual growth it has brought into my life. Gratefully. And then this one from Mississippi. Dear members, I understand the church is in need of a new roof and I want to help. Please use the enclosed donation where most needed. Also, I visit the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent website daily. It is a priceless resource of information, inspiration, and teaching. With love and gratitude, thank you. I too am so grateful for, that tremendous music we have. And I can tell you, Jim was not here early practicing, So he just sits down and plays like that. It's just wonderful. And then the beautiful, appropriate readings read so well, and the testimonies tonight, such encouragement. I've given this testimony before, but I always think about it on Independence Day and how wonderful that we can all be here tonight on Independence Day. And it's this, in Miscellany on page 162, Mrs. Eddy states that a small group of wise thinkers is better than a wilderness of dullards and stronger than the might of empires. So tonight, I am so grateful that we do have this small group of wise thinkers brought from all parts of the world, certainly from our country and the world. They've heard a calling to come and to be part of this very important work in keeping Mrs. Eddy's Christian Science moving forward its pure and correct way, to be supporting our website and all the things that we do here, and how important this work is. I can remember when years ago, if I was tempted to go in other paths, other directions, Mrs. Evans, who was my practitioner at that time, would say, you know, many other people can do that kind of work, but there are very few people who can do this work. And that always impressed me so. And Mrs. Eddy has said that science is known by the fewness and the faithfulness of its followers. And then Mrs. Eddy goes on, this is from the Christian Science Journal number 5, an early one. In the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham's prayer was that 50 or even 10 righteous men could be found in Sodom. That city would be saved from destruction. In regard to this story, Mrs. Eddy makes an interesting comment. Quote, a life or nation is saved in proportion to the predominance within of purity, patriotism, or other right motives. And this is the inner spiritual meaning of Abraham's petition to God. If Sodom City had in it enough moral worth, it would be saved, not otherwise. End quote. So, as you can see, our work is here and lies before us. The spiritualization of mankind to keep the moral worth of our nation and of all nations, turning to God, the commandments, the Sermon on the Mount, to purify our motives and our actions, to love our neighbor as ourselves. All the things that we have been taught and given in the Bible and in our textbook. I am so grateful that we have this band of workers. I'm so grateful to be here tonight with you all and to hear all the music, sounds, everything. It's just beautiful. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.